The transport ship slowly moved through space toward the bright moon of Kepler 442c. Inside the passenger area, Jake Miller sat quietly in his seat, looking out the window at the stars. He was just another recruit heading to the famous Spherian military academy, or at least that's what everyone thought. Jake looked normal for a human. He was not tall or short, not very strong-looking, and his brown hair was cut in a simple style. His clothes were the basic uniform given to all new recruits. Nothing about him seemed special or dangerous. He was just a regular guy from Earth, who somehow got accepted into the most important military school in the galaxy. The other passengers on the ship were very different from Jake. There was a huge creature called Gorthak, who came from the planet Krilla. He stood almost 8 feet tall and had thick, hard skin that looked like armor. His muscles were bigger than Jake's entire body, and when he moved, the floor shook a little. Gorthak kept looking at Jake and laughing quietly to himself. Next to Gorthak sat Zilpha, a female from the planet Vortha. She had 4 arms instead of 2, and her skin could change colors like a chameleon. Her eyes moved very fast, watching everything around her. She could move so quickly that sometimes she looked like a blur. When she saw Jake, she tilted her head like she was confused about something. The third alien was Quindal from the planet Nexar. He looked more like a human than the others, but his head was much bigger because his brain was larger. He had pale blue skin and big black eyes that seemed to see everything. He kept writing notes on a small computer and looking at Jake like he was solving a math problem. The transport ship finally reached the academy, and all the recruits got off. Jake picked up his small bag and followed the others. The academy was huge, built into the side of a mountain on the moon. It had tall towers and thick walls that looked like they could stop an army. Thousands of recruits from different planets walked around the grounds. Jake had never seen so many different types of aliens in one place. There were creatures with wings, others with multiple heads, and some that looked like walking trees. Of them seemed stronger, faster, or smarter than humans. Jake felt very small and ordinary among them. A loud voice called all the new recruits to gather in the main courtyard. The voice belonged to Instructor Vextar, a Krillian like Gorthak, but even bigger and scarier. He had scars all over his armor-like skin, and one of his eyes was replaced with a mechanical device that glowed red. "Welcome to the Zephyrian Military Academy," Vextar said in a voice that sounded like rocks grinding together. "This place will make you into real warriors, or it will break you. Most of you will not finish the program. Those who do will become part of the Galactic Defense Coalition, the most elite fighting force in known space." Vextar looked at all, the recruits with his good eye and his mechanical one. When his gaze stopped on Jake, he paused for a moment and made a sound that might have been laughter. "You will be divided into groups of 4, Vextar continued. "Each group will share a barracks and train together. Your success or failure affects your entire group. If one of you is weak, all of you suffer." Jake was assigned to Barracks Unit 7 along with Gorthak, Zilpha, and Quindal. The 4 of them walked to their new home, which was a simple building, with 4 beds, 4 lockers, and basic furniture. Jake chose the bed nearest the window and started unpacking his few belongings. Gorthak threw his huge bag on the bed across from Jake. The bed made a loud creaking sound under the weight. "So, little human," Gorthak said with a grin that showed his sharp teeth, "what makes you think you can survive here? You look like you would break if I sneezed too hard." Jake looked up from his unpacking. "I guess we'll find out," he said simply. Zilpha moved around the room so fast that she unpacked all her things in just a few seconds. "I have been studying human capabilities," she said, her voice making a clicking sound. "Your species is very weak compared to most others. Your bones break easily, your muscles are small, and your reflexes are slow. Why did they even accept you here?" Quindal was already setting up some kind of computer system on his desk. Without looking up, he said, "I have calculated the probability of a baseline human completing this program. The chances are 0.3%. That means out of 1,000 humans, only 3 would graduate, and those numbers assume the human has some special training or abilities. This one appears to be completely average." Jake continued unpacking without saying anything. He had learned long ago that sometimes it was better to let people think what they wanted to think. The next morning, all recruits had to take physical tests to see what they could do. Jake lined up with everyone else at the testing area. There were machines to test strength, speed, jumping ability, and reaction time. Each test was designed to work for different types of aliens, but that also meant they were very hard for humans. When it was Jake's turn for the strength test, he had to lift heavy weights above his head. Gorthak had lifted weights that were as heavy as a small car, making it look easy. When Jake tried the same test, he could barely lift half as much. The other recruits watching started to whisper and point. "Look at the human struggle," one of them said. "How did he even get accepted here?" said another. "Maybe they needed someone to carry bags for the real soldiers." A third one laughed. Jake finished the strength test and moved to the speed test. Here recruits had to run through an obstacle course as fast as possible. Zilpha had completed it so quickly that the timing machines had trouble keeping up. When Jake ran the course, he was careful and steady, but very slow compared to the others. The reaction test was even worse for Jake. Recruits had to catch balls of light that appeared randomly around them. Quindal had caught every single light ball because his big brain could predict where they would appear. Jake caught less than half of them. By the end of the testing day, Jake was ranked last out of all 200 new recruits. The results were posted on a big screen for everyone to see. Jake Miller was at the very bottom of the list. Gorthak found Jake sitting alone in the dining hall that evening. "Little Pink," Gorthak said, using a new nickname for Jake. "You did very badly today. Maybe you should ask to leave before you get hurt. This training will only get harder." Zilpha appeared next to them, moving so fast that Jake barely saw her sit down. "I timed your movements today," she said. "Your reaction speed is 10 times slower than mine. In a real fight, you would be dead before you even knew there was danger." Quindal joined them at the table, carrying a tablet computer. "I have prepared a detailed analysis of your performance," he said, showing Jake charts and numbers. "In every category, you scored in the bottom 5%. My calculations show that you have virtually no chance of improvement." Other recruits at nearby tables started listening to the conversation. Soon a small crowd had gathered to look at the human who had scored so poorly. Some of them seemed curious, others looked sorry for Jake, and a few were clearly amused. "Maybe humans are better at cooking than fighting," one recruit suggested, causing several others to laugh. "Or maybe they're good at cleaning," said another. "I heard humans are good with paperwork," added a third. "Maybe he can help the instructors with filing." Jake listened to all the comments and suggestions without getting angry or upset. He just ate his dinner quietly, while everyone talked about him like he wasn't there. When he finished eating, he stood up and walked back to his barracks. That night, as his 3 roommates slept, Jake took out a small device that looked like a normal communication pad. He typed a short message. "Arrived safely. Cover intact. Beginning assessment phase." After a moment, he received a reply. "Understood. Maintain cover at all costs. Report when ready." Jake deleted both messages and put the device away. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and probably more humiliation. But that was exactly what he needed. The longer everyone thought he was just a weak human who didn't belong at the academy, the better his real mission would go. Outside his window, the stars shone brightly in the space around the moon. Jake looked at them for a moment before going to sleep. Soon, everyone at this academy would learn something very important about humans, but not yet. For now, he was just Jake Miller, the weakest recruit who somehow made it into the most elite military school in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since Jake Miller arrived at the academy, and things had only gotten worse for him. Every day brought new training exercises that showed how different he was from the other recruits. While his alien classmates got stronger and faster, Jake seemed to stay the same weak human he had always been. The morning started with combat training in the zero-gravity chamber. This was a huge room where the artificial gravity could be turned off, making everyone float in the air. The instructors said this would prepare them for fighting in space or on ships. Jake floated awkwardly in the chamber, trying to control his movements like the others. Gorthak moved through the air like he was swimming, using his powerful arms to push himself from wall to wall. His thick armor skin protected him when he crashed into things, and he could grab enemies with incredible strength. Zilpha was even more impressive in zero gravity. Her forearms let her move in ways that seemed impossible. She could push off from multiple surfaces at once and change direction instantly. Her color-changing skin made her hard to see against the gray walls of the chamber. Quindal didn't move as fast as the others, but his big brain helped him calculate exactly where to go. He could predict how objects would move in zero gravity and plan his attacks perfectly. He never wasted energy on unnecessary movements. Jake bumped into walls, spun out of control, and generally looked like he had never been in zero gravity before, which was actually true, but everyone expected him to adapt quickly like soldiers should. Instead, he looked like a baby learning to walk. "Little Pink is going to make himself sick," Gorthak said, watching Jake spin helplessly after bouncing off a wall. "Maybe we should get him a bag in case he throws up." Zilpha appeared next to Jake so quickly that he didn't see her coming. "Your inner ear is not designed for this environment," she said in her clicking voice. "Humans evolved on a planet with steady gravity. You will always be clumsy here." The instructor, a floating alien with tentacles instead of arms, called for combat pairs. Each recruit had to fight against another recruit using practice weapons that couldn't really hurt anyone. Jake was paired with a small alien who looked like a walking lizard. Even though his opponent was one of the smallest recruits in the class, Jake still lost badly. The lizard alien moved too fast for Jake to follow, and its practice sword hit him over and over again. Jake tried to block and attack back, but he was always too slow and too weak. The other recruits watched Jake's fight and started making comments. "The human can't even beat Slicks, and Slicks is half his size," one of them said. "Maybe we should pair him with the cleaning robots next time." Another one laughed. "At least the robots might put up a good fight," added a third. After the zero-gravity training, the recruits moved to the tactical simulation room. This was where they learned to plan battles and make smart decisions during fights. The room had computers that could create fake battles, and the recruits had to figure out how to win. Jake sat at his computer terminal and looked at the battle scenario on his screen. He was supposed to lead a small group of soldiers to capture an enemy base. The computer showed him maps, information about enemy forces, and details about his own troops. Quindal finished his simulation in just 10 minutes. His solution was complex and perfect, using advanced mathematics to calculate exactly where to put each soldier and when to attack. The computer said his plan had a 94% chance of success with minimal losses. Gorthak took longer, but his plan was simple and effective. He would use his strong troops to smash through the enemy's front defenses, then overwhelm them with superior force. His plan had an 89% success rate, but more soldiers would be hurt. Zilpha's plan involved quick, sneaky attacks from multiple directions. Her troops would confuse the enemy and strike from unexpected places. The computer gave her plan an 87% success rate. Jake's plan was much simpler than the others. He would send his troops around the enemy base to attack from behind while making noise in front to distract them. It was a basic strategy that any first-year military student might think of. The computer analyzed Jake's plan and gave it only a 45% success rate. The instructor looked at Jake's results and shook his head sadly. "Miller," the instructor said, "your tactics are too simple for modern warfare. You need to think more like your classmates, study their methods, and try to improve." But Jake's humiliation wasn't over yet. The afternoon brought physical conditioning, which meant running, jumping, and strength exercises. All the recruits had to run 5 miles around the academy grounds while carrying heavy packs. Jake started the run with everyone else, but within the first mile, he was falling behind. His human lungs couldn't process oxygen as efficiently as alien lungs. His human muscles got tired faster than alien muscles. His human bones and joints weren't built for the intense exercise that other species could handle easily. Gorthak finished the run first, barely breathing hard despite carrying a pack that weighed 200 pounds. He wasn't even sweating, and he looked like he could run another 5 miles without any problem. Zilpha finished second, her forearms pumping smoothly as she ran. Her color-changing skin had turned dark to absorb heat more efficiently, and she looked like running was as natural as breathing for her. Quindal finished in the middle of the group. He wasn't as fast as the others, but his big brain had calculated the most efficient way to run, and he had paced himself perfectly to finish without wasting energy. Jake finished last, more than an hour after Gorthak. He was sweating heavily, breathing hard, and his legs shook from exhaustion. Several other recruits had waited at the finish line to watch him struggle across. "Maybe we should call a medical team," one recruit said, pretending to be worried. "Or maybe we should call his family to come pick him up," said another. "Does Earth have a special school for humans who can't handle real military training?" asked a third. That evening in the dining hall, Jake sat alone at a table in the corner. He was too tired to care about the food, which was designed to give energy to alien bodies and didn't taste very good to humans anyway. Gorthak approached his table carrying a tray of food and sat down across from Jake. "Little Pink," he said in a voice that was trying to be kind. "I have been thinking about your situation. Maybe you should talk to the instructors about changing to a different program." "What kind of different program?" Jake asked quietly. "Well," Gorthak said, "the Academy has training for support roles. People who fix equipment, handle communications, organize supplies. These jobs are very important and they don't require combat skills." Zilpha appeared at the table so fast that Jake barely saw her move. "Gorthak is right," she said. "I have observed many species, and humans seem better suited for technical work than fighting. Your brains are good at solving puzzles, even if your bodies are weak." Quindal joined them, setting down his tablet computer on the table. "I have been studying the Academy's curriculum," he said. "There are several non-combat tracks that might work better for you. Communications specialist, logistics coordinator, technical maintenance. All of these jobs keep you away from actual fighting." Jake looked at his three roommates. They were trying to be helpful, but their help felt like another kind of insult. They had already decided he couldn't be a real soldier, so they were suggesting jobs that would keep him safe and out of the way. "I appreciate the advice," Jake said, "but I want to try to finish the combat program." Gorthak made a sound that was like a sigh. "Little Pink, you have heart, and I respect that. But heart is not enough in real combat. In a real battle, enemies will not wait for you to catch up or give you time to rest. They will kill you in the first few seconds." Other recruits at nearby tables were listening to the conversation. Word had spread throughout the Academy about the weak human who couldn't keep up with basic training. Some recruits felt sorry for Jake, others thought he was funny, and a few were starting to get annoyed that he was slowing down group exercises. Maybe the instructors made a mistake when they accepted him, one recruit whispered to another. Or maybe Earth sent him here as a joke, the other one whispered back. "I heard that some planets have to send recruits even if they don't have good candidates," a third recruit added. "Maybe Earth didn't have anyone better." Jake heard these whispers but pretended not to. He finished his meal and stood up to leave. As he walked away from the table, he heard Gorthak talking to the others. "I like Little Pink," Gorthak said. "He tries hard and he never complains. But this place will kill him if he stays in combat training. Maybe we should talk to Instructor Vextar about moving him to a safer program." That night, Jake lay in his bed listening to his roommates sleep. Gorthak snored like a freight train. Zilpha made soft clicking sounds, and Quindal's big brain kept working even when he slept, making quiet humming noises. Jake took out his hidden communication device and typed another message. "Cover holding. Subjects showing expected behavior patterns. Request permission to continue mission despite personal discomfort." The reply came quickly. "Permission granted. Remember that temporary humiliation serves the greater purpose. Your sacrifice is noted and appreciated." 2 months had passed since Jake arrived at the Academy. The morning started like any other day with recruits getting ready for their usual training exercises. Jake was in the dining hall eating breakfast with his roommates when suddenly loud alarms began ringing throughout the entire Academy. The sound was different from the normal training alarms. This was the emergency alert that meant real danger was coming. All conversation stopped as every recruit and instructor looked up at the speakers mounted on the walls. Commander Thisera's voice came through the speakers. She was a Nexari like Quindal, with the same large head and pale blue skin, but her voice carried the authority of someone who had commanded real battles. All personnel report to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. We have detected incoming hostile forces. Jake followed the crowd of recruits as they moved quickly through the academy corridors. Everyone was confused and worried. The academy was supposed to be safe, located on a neutral moon that no one ever attacked. It was a place for learning, not fighting real battles. In the main assembly hall, Commander Thisra stood on a raised platform where everyone could see her. Behind her was a large screen showing space around the moon. On the screen, hundreds of red dots were moving toward their location. Long-range sensors have detected a Void Hunter fleet approaching this system, Commander Thisra announced. The fleet consists of approximately 400 bioships and will reach our location in 6 hours. A worried murmur went through the crowd of recruits. Everyone had heard stories about the Void Hunters, but most people thought they were just scary tales told to frighten children. The Void Hunters were supposed to be monsters that traveled through space, destroying entire planets and eating everything living on them. The nearest Galactic Defense Coalition fleet is 3 days away, the commander continued. Evacuation. Ships cannot reach us before the Void Hunters arrive. Therefore, we must defend this academy using our own resources. Instructor Vextar stepped forward, his mechanical eye glowing brighter than usual. All senior recruits will be assigned to defensive positions. You will use real weapons and face real enemies. This is no longer training, this is war. Jake felt his heart beating faster, but not from fear. This was the kind of situation he had been trained for, even though no one at the academy knew about. His real training. He looked around at his fellow recruits and saw that most of them looked scared but determined. Gorthak stood up straighter, his armor-like skin seeming to get thicker. "We will fight with honor," he said loudly. "Krillians, do not run from any enemy." Zilpha's skin changed to a dark red color, which Jake had learned meant she was excited or angry. "Vorthons are ready for battle," she said, her forearms flexing. "We will move fast and strike hard." Quindal was already working on his tablet computer, probably calculating battle strategies. "The odds are not good," he said quietly, "but we have advantages they may not expect." Commander Thisera began assigning positions to different groups of recruits. The strongest fighters like Gorthak were sent to the main defensive walls. The fastest fighters like Zilpha were assigned to mobile strike teams. The smartest fighters like Quindal were put in charge of coordinating defenses and communications. When the commander got to Jake's name, she paused and looked at him with her large black eyes. "Miller," she said, "you will be assigned to support duties in the command center, help with communications and supply coordination." Jake stood up from his seat. "Commander, I request assignment to a combat position." The entire assembly hall became quiet. Everyone turned to look at the weak human who had failed at every training exercise, but was now asking to fight against the most dangerous enemies in the galaxy. Gorthak quickly stood up too. "Commander, Little Pink has courage, but he should stay somewhere safe. He is not ready for real combat. The human cannot survive against Void Hunters," Zilpha added, her skin turning a worried yellow color. "They will kill him before he can even raise his weapon." Quindal looked up from his computer. "My calculations show that Miller has a 99.7% chance of death if assigned to combat duty. He should remain in a protected area." Other recruits began agreeing with Jake's roommates. They had all seen how poorly he performed in training, and they didn't want to watch him die in his first real battle. Commander Thisera looked at Jake for a long moment. "Miller, your classmates are concerned for your safety. Perhaps support duties would be more appropriate for your skill level." "I understand their concerns, Commander," Jake replied, "but I want to do my part in defending the academy." Instructor Vextar stepped forward, his scarred face showing what might have been sympathy. "Miller, courage is important, but so is staying alive. Real combat is different from training. The Void Hunters show no mercy, and they kill without hesitation." Jake nodded but didn't change his mind. "I still request combat assignment, sir." The commander sighed, a sound that came out like a whistle through her alien vocal cords. "Very well, Miller. You will be assigned to Reserve Squad 7. If the main defenses hold, you will remain in the command center. If they fail, she didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Reserve Squad 7 was basically the last line of defense. It meant that if Jake ever had to fight, the academy was already lost, and everyone was probably going to die anyway. After the assembly, recruits were dismissed to prepare for battle. Jake walked with his roommates toward the weapons storage area. The academy had weapons for training, but now they were opening the advanced weapons vault that contained real military equipment. "Little Pink," Gorthak said as they walked. "I know you want to help, but please be careful. Void Hunters are not like the practice enemies we fight in training. They are fast, smart, and they want to kill everything they see. Your reaction? Time is too slow for real combat," Zilpha added. "In training, we can wait for you to catch up. In battle, there is no waiting. You must move and fight at full speed or you die." Quindal was carrying his tablet and still running calculations. "I have been studying Void Hunter tactics," he said. "They use biotechnology that adapts to conventional weapons. Standard military training may not be effective against them." At the weapons vault, each recruit was given equipment appropriate for their species and abilities. Gorthak received heavy armor and powerful weapons that matched his strength. Zilpha got lightweight, gear that wouldn't slow down her speed. Quindal was given advanced communication equipment and tactical computers. Jake was handed basic equipment, a simple energy rifle, standard body armor, and a communication headset. The weapons officer looked at Jake with pity as he handed over the gear. "Stay behind cover, son," the weapons officer said. "Don't try to be a hero, just stay alive as long as you can." Jake took the equipment and checked it carefully, the way any soldier would. But as he examined the weapons, he noticed things that his roommates didn't see. He mentally noted the weapon's power settings, the armor's weak points, and the communication frequencies. This was information that might be useful later. That afternoon, Jake found himself assigned to the command center as part of Reserve Squad 7. The command center was deep inside the academy, surrounded by thick walls and protective barriers. It was the safest place in the entire facility. Jake sat at a computer terminal, monitoring communications between different defensive positions. On the screens around him, he could see video feeds from cameras placed throughout the academy. The other recruits were taking positions on walls, in towers, and at strategic choke points. Commander Thisara stood at the center of the room coordinating the defense. Instructor Vextar was with the frontline troops, preparing for the first attack. Other instructors were positioned throughout the academy, each one responsible for a different sector. As Jake watched the preparations, he began to understand something that worried him. The academy's defenses were designed for training exercises, not real warfare. The weapons were powerful but limited in number. The barriers were strong but had obvious weak points. The defensive positions were good for teaching tactics but not for surviving a real siege. Jake opened a communication channel on his headset and spoke quietly. "Command center to all positions, requesting status report." Voices came back from different parts of the academy. Gorthak reported from the main wall. "Defense position Alpha ready. We will hold this line." Zilpha reported from the mobile strike team. "Strike team Beta in position, ready to move on your command." Quindal reported from the tactical center. Communication hub online. All defensive calculations complete. But as Jake listened to these reports, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The academy's defenders were thinking like students, not like soldiers. They were planning to fight an honorable battle using the tactics they had learned in class. The Void Hunters didn't fight honorable battles. They fought to win, using any method necessary. They would adapt to the Academy's defenses and find ways to overcome them. They would use the Academy's own systems against the defenders. They would turn this place into a slaughterhouse. Jake quietly activated his hidden communication device and sent an urgent message. "Situation critical. Enemy. Force superior to defensive capabilities. Request immediate extraction and abort of mission." The Void Hunter ships arrived 2 hours earlier than expected, catching the Academy defenders off guard. Jake watched the main screen in the command center as hundreds of dark shapes appeared in space around the moon. The ships looked like living creatures made of metal and flesh, with long tentacles and glowing eyes that pulsed with evil light. Commander Thisera stood next to Jake, her large brain working quickly to adjust their defense plans. All units, enemy contact imminent. They are deploying landing pods toward the academy. Prepare for ground assault. Jake could see the landing pods on the screen, falling toward the academy like deadly rain. Each pod was the size of a small building and carried dozens of Void Hunter soldiers inside. The pods crashed into the ground around the academy walls, sending up clouds of dust and debris. The first wave of Void Hunters emerged from their pods and began attacking the outer defenses. Jake had never seen anything like them before. They were horrible creatures that looked like they had been made by combining different animals with machines. Some had multiple arms with sharp claws, others had tentacles instead of legs, and all of them had glowing red eyes that showed no mercy. Gorthok was positioned at the main wall with other strong fighters. Jake watched him through the security cameras as he fired his heavy weapons at the approaching enemies. His shots hit the Void Hunters and knocked them down, but within seconds, the creatures stood up again, their wounds already healing. Target adapting to energy weapons, Gorthok reported through his radio. Switching to kinetic rounds. Gorthok changed to bullets instead of energy blasts, and this worked better for a while. But Jake could see that the Void Hunters were learning from each attack. After being shot by bullets, their skin began growing thicker armor to protect them. Zilpha was leading her strike team in hit-and-run attacks against Void Hunter positions. Her team would appear suddenly, attack with everything. They had then disappear before the enemies could fight back. Jake watched her moving so fast that she looked like a blur on the camera screens. But even Zilpha's speed wasn't enough. The Void Hunters had their own fast soldiers that could match her movements. Worse, they started predicting where she would attack next and setting traps for her team. Quindal was in the tactical center, trying to coordinate the defense using his superior intelligence. His computer calculated the best positions for defenders and the most effective weapons for each situation. But every time he found a solution, the Void Hunters adapted to it. They are learning faster than we can adjust, Quindal reported with worry in his voice. Every tactic we use, they develop a counter-tactic within minutes. Jake watched the battle unfold and realized that his worst fears were coming true. The Academy's defenders were fighting bravely, but they were fighting like they had been taught in school. They used proper military tactics and followed the rules of honorable warfare. The Void Hunters didn't follow any rules. They fought to win at any cost. When the defenders expected them to attack from one direction, they tunneled underneath the walls. When the defenders used their best weapons, the Void Hunters captured them and learned how they worked. Within 1 hour, the outer defenses were failing. Casualty reports started coming in over the radio. Many recruits had been killed or wounded, and the survivors were being pushed back toward the Academy's inner buildings. All units, fall back to secondary positions, Commander Thisera ordered. Repeat, fall back to secondary positions. Jake could hear the stress in her voice. The battle was not going as planned, and she knew that the Academy could not hold out much longer. Gorthok's voice came over the radio, breathing heavily from fighting. Little Pink, are you safe in there? These things are getting through our lines. They don't fight like anything we studied. Zilpha's report came next, her clicking voice faster than usual from excitement and fear. Strike teams are taking heavy losses. Enemy adapts to our movement patterns. We need new strategies. Quindal sounded frustrated and confused. All conventional tactics failing. Computer models predict total defensive collapse within 2 hours. We need a different approach. Jake looked around the command center and saw that the other support staff were starting to panic. Some of them were preparing to evacuate to deeper levels of the Academy. Others were destroying important files so the Void Hunters couldn't capture them. Commander Thisera was still trying to coordinate the defense, but Jake could see that she was running out of options. The Academy simply didn't have enough weapons or soldiers to fight off such a large attack. Reserve squads to defensive positions, the commander ordered. All remaining personnel prepare for final stand. This was the moment Jake had been dreading. Reserve Squad 7 was being called up, which meant the main defenses had failed and the Academy was about to fall. In a few minutes, he would be expected to take his basic weapons and join the hopeless fight. Jake made his decision. He walked across the command center to where Commander Thisera was standing. She was studying tactical displays and trying to find some way to save her academy and all the young recruits under her command. "Commander," Jake said quietly, "requesting permission to speak with you privately." She looked at him with her large, black eyes, probably wondering why the weakest recruit in the academy wanted to talk during the middle of a battle. "Miller, this is not the time for personal concerns. Take your position with Reserve Squad 7. "Commander," Jake said, using a tone of voice he had never used before at the academy, "I need to tell you something important about my mission here." Something in Jake's voice made Commander Thyssera pause. She had heard thousands of recruits speak during her years at the academy, and something about Jake sounded different now. Jake reached into his equipment belt and pulled out the small device that looked like a communication pad. But instead of using it to send messages, he spoke into it with a clear, authoritative voice. "Authorization code Tango 77 Charlie 9. Identity confirmation requested for emergency protocol activation." The device responded immediately with a mechanical voice that everyone in the command center could hear. "Identity confirmed. Lieutenant Colonel Jake Miller, Human Special Operations Command. Emergency Protocol 7 authorized." The entire command center became silent except for the sound of distant explosions from the battle outside. Everyone stared at Jake, including Commander Thyssera, whose large brain was trying to process what she had just heard. "Commander," Jake continued, his voice now carrying the authority of a senior military officer, "I am Lieutenant Colonel Jake Miller of Human Special Operations Command. For the past 2 months, I have been conducting a covert assessment of this academy's training methods and defensive capabilities." Commander Thyssera's eyes grew even larger. "You are a spy?" "I am an intelligence officer conducting an authorized evaluation mission," Jake corrected. "My orders were to observe and report on galactic military training standards while maintaining deep cover as a weak recruit." Other staff members in the command center were listening with amazement. The weak human who couldn't complete basics training exercises was actually a high-ranking officer from one of the galaxy's most secretive military organizations. "But your performance," Commander Thyssera said, still confused. "You failed every test, every exercise. How can you be special operations?" Jake's expression became serious. "Because human military doctrine has nothing in common with standard galactic training methods. We don't train to be individually superior fighters. We train for something completely different." Through the radio, Jake could hear his roommates still fighting desperately against the Void Hunters. Gorthak was calling for ammunition. Zilpha was requesting medical support for her wounded team members. Quindal was reporting that his computer predictions showed total defeat within 90 minutes. "Commander," Jake said, "my cover mission is now secondary to defending this academy. I am requesting immediate combat authorization and access to your advanced weapons vault." "But Lieutenant Colonel," Commander Thyssera said, "even if you are special operations, you are still just one soldier. What can one human do against an entire Void Hunter army?" Jake looked at the tactical displays showing the failing defenses, then looked back at the commander. "You're about to find out what humans are really capable of when we stop pretending to be something we're not." Commander Thyssera hesitated for only a moment, then nodded. "Authorization granted. What do you need?" "Access to all Academy systems, complete tactical control, and permission to implement human combat doctrine," Jake replied. "Human combat doctrine?" the commander asked. Jake picked up his basic energy rifle and checked its power settings, but not the way he had been pretending to do for 2 months. This time he handled the weapon with the smooth efficiency of someone who had used similar weapons thousands of times. "Commander," Jake said, "your people fight with honor, courage, and respect for the rules of warfare. Those are admirable qualities, but they don't work against enemies like the Void Hunters." Another explosion shook the academy, and more casualty reports came over the radio. The defenses were collapsing faster now, and the Void Hunters were getting closer to the command center. Jake moved through the academy corridors with a purpose that no one had ever seen from him before. His steps were quiet and controlled, like a hunter tracking dangerous prey. The weak, clumsy recruit who had struggled with basic training was gone, replaced by something that made even the academy's instructors step out of his way. His first stop was the advanced weapons vault that had been denied to him weeks earlier. Jake placed his hand on the security scanner, and his special operations codes overrode all the normal restrictions. The vault doors opened with a heavy mechanical sound. Inside the vault were weapons designed for the most dangerous missions in the galaxy. Energy cannons that could destroy vehicles, explosives that could level buildings, and armor that could stop almost any attack. But Jake walked past all of these powerful weapons and selected items that seemed almost primitive by comparison. He took simple kinetic rifles, basic explosive charges, standard communication equipment, and lightweight armor. To anyone watching, it looked like Jake was choosing the weakest weapons available. But Jake wasn't thinking about individual firepower. He was thinking about something completely different. Jake's radio crackled with reports from his former roommates, who were still fighting desperately against the Void Hunter advance. "Colonel Miller," came Gorthak's voice, still calling him by his new rank but sounding confused. "The enemy has broken through Sector 7. We need reinforcements or we will lose the eastern wall." "Little Pink," Gorthak added quietly, "I still can't believe you are really a colonel. You seemed so weak in training." Jake spoke into his radio with calm authority. "Gorthak, I need you to evacuate Sector 7 immediately. Do not try to hold that position." "But Colonel," Gorthak protested, "if we give up the eastern wall, the enemy will have a clear path to the main academy." "That's exactly what I want them to think," Jake replied. "Pull all defenders back to the inner courtyard. Make it look like you are retreating in panic." Zilpha's voice came over the radio next, her clicking sounds faster than usual from stress and exhaustion. "Colonel, my strike teams are trapped in Building 12. Enemy forces have surrounded us. We need immediate extraction." Jake looked at the tactical display on his portable computer. Building 12 was deep in Void Hunter territory, and any rescue attempt would be suicide for normal troops. "Zilpha, stay exactly where you are. Do not attempt to break out. I am coming to get you." "Colonel," Zilpha said with worry in her voice, "there are over 50 enemy soldiers between your position and ours. You cannot fight through them alone." "I'm not going to fight through them," Jake said. "I'm going to make them fight each other." Quindal's report came next, his big brain working frantically to understand the situation. "Colonel Miller, I am confused by your tactical decisions. My calculations show that abandoning defensive positions will lead to faster defeat, not victory." Jake was already moving toward Building 12, but his route didn't follow any path that military academy students would recognize. Instead of moving through the main corridors where he might encounter enemy forces, Jake was traveling through maintenance tunnels, service shafts, and areas of the academy that most people didn't even know existed. "Quindal," Jake said as he crawled through a ventilation system, "your calculations are based on conventional warfare tactics. Human tactics don't follow conventional rules. Stop trying to predict what I'm doing, and start helping me do it." "But Colonel," Quindal said, "how can I help if I don't understand the strategy?" Jake reached Building 12 and quietly observed the Void Hunter forces surrounding it. There were indeed about 50 enemy soldiers, just as Zilpha had reported. They had positioned themselves to prevent anyone from escaping the building, and they were slowly closing in for the final assault. "Quindal, I need you to take control of the Academy's environmental systems," Jake said while setting up his basic explosives in carefully chosen locations. "Can you access the heating, lighting, and air circulation controls?" "Yes, Colonel. But why do you need environmental controls during a battle?" Jake planted his last explosive charge and moved to a new position. "Because I'm going to turn this entire academy into a weapon, and I need you to help me aim it." Jake activated his first explosive, but not where anyone expected. Instead of targeting the Void Hunter soldiers directly, he destroyed a water main that ran underneath their position. High-pressure water began flooding the area, forcing the enemy soldiers to move to higher ground. His second explosive took out electrical cables that powered the building's lights. Suddenly, the Void Hunters found themselves standing in darkness, unable to see clearly. Their natural night vision was good, but not perfect. "Quindal now," Jake said into his radio. "Turn on the emergency lighting system but set it to strobe mode, maximum brightness, random intervals. The Building 12 area suddenly began flashing with blinding light that turned on and off unpredictably. The Void Hunters, whose eyes had just adjusted to darkness, were now being constantly blinded by the strobing lights. Jake used this confusion to move closer to the enemy position, but instead of attacking them directly, he did something that none of the Academy's military training had ever taught. He began making sounds. Jake threw small objects to create noise in different directions. He used his communication equipment to broadcast fake radio messages on frequencies the Void Hunters could hear. He even imitated the sounds that different alien species made when they were wounded or calling for help. The Void Hunter soldiers, already confused by the water and lights, began hearing sounds that suggested they were being attacked from multiple directions by different types of enemies. Their biomechanical brains, which were designed to adapt to conventional attacks, couldn't process this kind of psychological warfare. Some Void Hunters started shooting at shadows and sounds that weren't really there. Others began attacking each other, thinking that the sounds were coming from enemy infiltrators who had somehow gotten into their ranks. "Colonel," came Zilpha's amazed voice over the radio. "The enemy soldiers are fighting each other. How did you do that?" "Humans don't just fight with weapons," Jake replied while setting up his next phase of the operation. "We fight with fear, confusion, and paranoia. We make our enemies destroy themselves." Jake's radio crackled with reports from other parts of the Academy. The Void Hunter forces that had been advancing steadily were now receiving confusing reports from their soldiers at Building 12. Their commanders couldn't understand why an entire squad was requesting backup against enemies that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "Quindal," Jake said, "I need you to access the Academy's communication systems. Can you broadcast false radio signals?" "Yes, Colonel, but what kind of signals?" Jake was now moving toward the main Void Hunter command position, using the confusion at Building 12 as a distraction. "I want you to send fake distress calls from Void Hunter units that don't actually exist. Make it sound like they are being attacked all over the Academy by large numbers of Academy defenders." Within minutes, the Void Hunter command structure began receiving dozens of emergency calls from units that were supposedly fighting for their lives against overwhelming Academy forces. The problem was that half of these units didn't actually exist, and the other half were nowhere near the locations they were reporting from. Jake reached the main Void Hunter command post, which was located in what used to be the Academy's main courtyard. Hundreds of enemy soldiers were positioned around their biomechanical command ship, which looked like a giant insect made of metal and flesh. Any conventional military force would need an army to attack such a heavily defended position. Jake attacked it with a handful of basic explosives and a simple understanding of psychology. He didn't target the command ship itself. Instead, he targeted the ground underneath it. The Academy was built on a moon with lower gravity than most planets, and its foundations were designed to be flexible. Jake's explosives were placed at stress points in the ground that would cause maximum seismic disruption without actually destroying the Academy's structure. When the charges went off, the entire courtyard began shaking like an earthquake. The Void Hunter command ship, which was designed for space combat, wasn't built to handle unstable ground. It began tilting and sliding as the surface underneath it shifted. But the psychological effect was even more important than the physical damage. The Void Hunter commanders suddenly found themselves receiving panic reports from all over the Academy. Their communication networks were full of confusing signals, and now their own command post was under attack by an enemy they couldn't see or understand. "All units," Jake heard over the captured Void Hunter communication frequencies. "Enemy forces are using unknown tactics. Request immediate fleet support for ground operations." Jake smiled as he listened to the confused enemy communications. The Void Hunters were calling for help from their ships in space because they couldn't understand what was happening on the ground. "Gorthak, Zilpha Quindal," Jake said into his radio. "Begin final phase operations. Attack enemy positions, but don't fight like you learned in Academy training. Fight like humans." "Colonel," Gorthak said with confusion, "we are not humans. How do we fight like humans?"